The war between humans and the Xyrathi Empire had finally ended. 5 long years of fire, steel, and screams had fallen silent. Planets burned, soldiers were lost, and entire worlds were left in ruins. The sky no longer echoed with engines or missiles, and only with the cold whisper of peace. Captain Daniel Reeve, a human soldier known by his comrades as the Iron Ghost, stood among the victors on the grand hall of the alien capital. He had survived every battle, every ambush, every hopeless mission, but even victory felt heavy to him. His armor still carried the scratches of war, and his eyes carried the weight of ghosts. The Xyrathi, tall, silver-skinned aliens with shining eyes, had been defeated. Their empire was broken, and now their queen offered gifts of surrender to the human alliance: gold, starships, and their royal daughters. It was an ancient custom of their kind. The conquered would give their royal bloodline to the conquerors as symbols of peace and honor. 7 princesses stood before the human commanders, each one graceful, beautiful, and proud. Their gowns shimmered like starlight, their movements elegant and calm. They looked like statues carved from living metal. The hall was filled with whispers as one by one, the generals stepped forward to claim their prizes. The first general chose Princess Serana, the eldest, tall and fierce, her beauty sharp as a blade. The second took Princess Vera, the one known for her charm and political cunning. Each man selected the most admired, the most powerful, the most admired in the alien court. Then came Captain Daniel's turn. The Queen's eyes rested on him with quiet curiosity. "Captain Reeve," she said in her cold, musical tone, "you fought with honor. You may choose one daughter of mine as your gift. Choose well, for she will bind your worlds in peace." Daniel walked slowly down the line. The princesses stood tall, unblinking, their faces like polished silver masks. They looked at him with a mix of pride and hidden fear. To them, humans were brutal, unpredictable, too full of emotion. He passed the tall ones, the proud ones, the ones who whispered among themselves in their alien tongue. Then at the far end he saw someone different. She stood half a step behind the rest, quiet and small compared to her sisters. Her skin was dull silver, her eyes a soft shade of violet, not bright like the others, but deep, almost sad. She didn't wear heavy jewels or expensive fabrics, only a simple gown that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her name was Princess Lyra, the youngest, the least admired. Among her own kind, she was called the Silent Shade. She was shy, often forgotten, and many believed she brought bad luck. Even her own mother rarely spoke of her, but Daniel stopped in front of her. The room grew quiet. Even the translators paused their whispering. Lyra blinked up at him, uncertain. Her lips parted slightly as if she couldn't believe someone had stopped for her. Daniel studied her face for a long moment. She didn't look proud or angry. She looked human. When the Queen spoke again, her tone was formal. "Have you made your choice, Captain?" Daniel nodded slowly. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had seen too much and wanted nothing more than peace. "I choose her," he said. The words echoed through the great hall like a strange wind. Every alien head turned. The other princesses looked at each other in disbelief. The humans murmured among themselves. Some laughed quietly, thinking it was a joke. The Queen's cold eyes narrowed slightly. "You choose Lyra? The youngest?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "I choose her." Lyra's breath caught in her chest. She whispered almost to herself, "You choose." Daniel gave a small nod. "You deserve freedom as much as anyone else." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Queen gave a small forced smile. "Very well, human. The choice is yours. May your decision bring you what you seek." As the ceremony ended, Daniel and Lyra walked side by side out of the grand hall. The other soldiers stared after them. The whispers followed like shadows. Why her? He could have had anyone. He wasted his chance, but Daniel didn't care. For the first time in a long time, he had made a choice not out of duty, not out of pride, but out of something quietly human. And behind him, the forgotten princess walked with her head just a little higher, because someone finally had seen her. The hallways of the Xyrathi palace were filled with echoes of whispers and silk steps as Captain Daniel Reeve walked beside Princess Lyra. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow them, every soft voice carrying a question. Why her? He could feel the weight of it, the judgment and disbelief. But he ignored it. He had made his choice, and no one else's opinion could change it. Lyra walked quietly beside him, her hands folded in front of her. She was nervous, not because she was afraid of the humans, but because she had never been chosen, never been noticed. Her life had been filled with shadows. Her sisters received praise, attention, and admiration while she was always overlooked. She had grown used to silence, to being invisible, yet for the first time she felt eyes on her that were not critical or dismissive, eyes that saw her as a person. The other princesses were not as kind. They whispered among themselves in the alien language, voices sharp and full of mockery. "The human takes pity on a shadow," one hissed. Another laughed softly. "Even he knows she's useless." But Lyra didn't answer. She only kept walking, her violet eyes fixed on the floor, feeling the strange warmth of Daniel's presence beside her. Daniel knew they were talking about her. He could hear their words, though he did not understand the language fully. He didn't care. The entire empire could scoff if they wanted. He would not change his mind. He had seen too many soldiers die for meaningless glory. He had watched friends die for medals, for symbols, for pride. Lyra was not a symbol, and she did not need to be. She was real, alive, human in her vulnerability, and for him that was enough. When they reached the human delegation's ship, Lyra paused. She turned to Daniel, her voice soft and uncertain. "Do you like me?" she asked, almost in a whisper. Daniel looked at her, his face calm but his eyes serious. "I don't know about like," he said. "I see you. I see who you are. That's more important than beauty or rank." Her lips trembled. No one had ever said such words to her before. She had been dismissed, ignored, and sometimes even blamed for things she hadn't done. And now here was a human soldier, a man who had fought wars, who had killed and survived, and yet he saw her as she was, not as a trophy, not as a weapon, not as a prize. They walked in silence the rest of the way, passing through corridors lined with strange artifacts and alien banners. Lyra glanced at Daniel once, seeing the faint lines of exhaustion etched into his face, the scars that marked his hands and arms. He was human, yes, and flawed, but there was a strength there that went beyond muscles and weapons. There was something quiet, something steady, something that made her feel safe. The ship's doors closed behind them, sealing them away from the palace and its whispers. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, a constant vibration that matched the rhythm of Lyra's nervous heartbeat. She looked around at the humans, the officers who were laughing and celebrating their victory, and felt an odd mix of fear and curiosity. Here she was completely alone except for the man who had chosen her. Daniel noticed her hesitation. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture small but grounding. "It will be different now," he said quietly. "You are not a shadow anymore. You will walk beside me as a person, not as a pawn." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a small smile. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it lit her face in a way nothing else had before. She had never imagined anyone could look at her like that. Not her family, not her court, not even herself. And yet, here was Daniel, a human soldier who had seen the quiet strength in her and valued it. The rest of the journey to the human capital would be long, but Lyra no longer felt invisible. She felt noticed. She felt chosen. And as the stars passed outside the ship's viewport, she realized that perhaps being chosen by the least likely person, a human, a warrior, a stranger, was better than any praise she had ever received from her own people. Daniel remained silent beside her, but she felt his presence like a shield. And in that quiet companionship, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a place in this new world, because sometimes the world's attention is not as valuable as the attention of the one person who truly sees you. The ship hummed steadily as it cut through the empty darkness of space. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past like frozen fire. Inside, the cabin was quiet, almost painfully so. Captain Daniel Reeve sat in a corner, arms crossed over his chest, staring at the star-filled void. His face was calm, almost stoic, but the lines around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders spoke of memories he could not escape. Princess Lyra sat across from him, her violet eyes following the ever-changing constellations. She had never traveled through space like this before, had never seen the stars up close, and yet she felt none of the excitement her sisters often spoke of. Instead, she felt something she had never experienced, a strange, tentative peace. Daniel had been quiet since leaving the palace. He didn't talk about the battles, the enemies, or the medals. Lyra didn't press him, though she wanted to. She understood that some wounds were too deep for words. Instead, she watched him, learning the language of his silence, the way his jaw tightened when his mind wandered, the way his hands twitched slightly as if still gripping a weapon, the way he flinched at sudden noises even when there was no danger. After hours of silence, she finally spoke. "Do your people always celebrate war this way?" Her voice was soft, curious, almost childlike. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He didn't look at her. He only kept staring at the stars. "No," he said finally. "We celebrate that it's over. Not that it happened." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Lyra tilted her head, trying to understand. "It sounds sad." "It is," he said quietly, almost to himself. "War is not something to celebrate. It leaves scars, and not all of them are visible. Some people don't survive it. Some people are never the same." Lyra's small hands folded in her lap. She thought about her own life, about being overlooked, ignored, dismissed. She realized she had lived in her own kind of war, one of shadows and silence. And yet, sitting beside Daniel, she felt a strange connection, a bridge between two broken worlds. "You are strong," she said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you look tired." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Strong enough to fight, maybe. Not strong enough to forget." She didn't know what to say. No words could ease the weight he carried, but she reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of his hand. It was a small gesture, almost hesitant, but he noticed. He didn't pull away. Instead, he glanced down at her hand, then back at the stars. "You know," Lyra said softly. "Sometimes we survive by holding on to someone else's warmth. Not by ourselves." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in hours. Her violet eyes were steady, her face calm, not demanding anything, not asking him to be anyone other than himself. And in that moment, he realized something profound. He was not alone. The hours passed like this. Quiet words, small gestures, shared glances. Lyra learned about Earth in fragments, its green forests, its soft grass, its oceans that stretched beyond imagination. Daniel learned about Lyra not from her words, but from her presence. She was gentle, observant, and yet stronger than she appeared. She had survived a life where she was considered nothing, and she still carried herself with dignity. Night on the ship felt endless, but it was also comforting. Daniel no longer felt the constant edge of tension he had carried through battle. Lyra's presence grounded him, reminded him that there was something to protect, something to care for beyond war and duty. Finally, as they both leaned back in their seats, the hum of the engines and the stars outside became a lullaby. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to relax, if only slightly. And Lyra, sitting quietly beside him, realized that she had found a kind of peace she had never imagined. Sometimes, she thought, the most unexpected friendships, the ones born of quiet understanding, are the strongest. And sometimes even the coldest journey can carry warmth if there is someone willing to walk it with you. The human capital was alive with noise, celebration and official ceremonies when Captain Daniel Reeve and Princess Lyra arrived. Ships of every size gleamed in the docking bays. Officers and politicians in perfect uniforms greeted the returning soldiers, and reporters floated above the streets, recording the heroes of the war. Medals were pinned, speeches were made, and the air smelled of victory. But Daniel felt none of it. Victory had never been his reward. Survival had always been his only goal. Lyra, walking beside him, felt overwhelmed. Humans were loud, messy, and unpredictable. Their greetings were warm but chaotic, and every glance she received carried a question she didn't yet understand. She was used to the strict silence of her people, to ceremonies that were elegant, calculated, and precise. Here she felt exposed, yet strangely alive. The high command summoned Daniel to a formal hall, a place of polished steel and glass, with lights that reflected like sunlight off water. Admiral Kress, a stern man with sharp eyes and a booming voice, waited for him, surrounded by other officers. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity, disapproval, and disbelief. "Captain Reeve," the admiral began, his voice echoing in the large hall. "You have returned from the Zarathi Empire victorious, and yet—" He paused, letting the tension build. "We are confused by your choice. Why this one?" He gestured toward Lyra, who had remained quiet, standing slightly behind Daniel. She is the least admired, another officer said, his tone sharp. The others were powerful, influential, able to strengthen alliances. Why choose her? She is nothing. Daniel's eyes did not waver. His voice was calm, steady, and full of a quiet authority that silenced the room. I chose her because she is real, because she is not a symbol or a prize, because she deserves freedom as much as anyone else. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The admiral's brow furrowed. Captain, this is not about morality. This is about diplomacy, alliances, power. You are wasting your chance and ours. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at Lyra, who had been listening to every word, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She met his eyes, and in that moment, she saw something she had never seen in anyone before. Unwavering conviction and care that was not meant to impress or obey anyone but her. You spoke for me, she whispered quietly, more to herself than to him. Daniel nodded. I couldn't let them cage you like a trophy. Not you. Not anyone. Lyra's chest swelled with a quiet warmth. She had never been defended like this, never been protected, never been chosen for who she was rather than what she represented. And now, standing in the midst of chaos and judgment, she realized something profound. She mattered. The officers tried to continue the argument, but Daniel's calm presence held them at bay. No one could easily dismiss someone who had survived wars that most people would not live through, and though he didn't raise his voice or demand obedience, the strength in his silence was enough to make them pause. Finally, the admiral shook his head, frustrated but unwilling to challenge him further. Very well, Captain. It is your choice. But remember, not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will see things as you do. Lyra stepped closer to Daniel. Her small hand brushed against his arm, a tentative gesture of trust. Thank you, she said softly, for choosing me. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. No one else deserved it. You deserve more than to be a shadow. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt pride that wasn't borrowed from her sisters or granted by her family. She had been chosen not for her status, not for her beauty, not for her usefulness, but simply because someone had seen her. Truly seen her. Outside the hall, the city glittered like 1,000 stars, but Lyra no longer felt small. She felt seen, safe, and quietly brave. And as she walked beside Daniel, she realized that this strange human, this soldier who had fought worlds, had given her something far greater than titles or jewels. He had given her respect and something even more precious, a choice, and she would follow him, wherever he led, because for the first time, she wanted to. Weeks passed after their arrival on Earth, and life slowly began to settle into a strange rhythm. The city was alive with lights, vehicles, and the constant hum of human activity. Daniel's duties kept him busy, reviewing reports and attending strategy meetings, but now with Lyra beside him, the burden felt lighter. At least slightly. Lyra adapted quickly to small things, learning to walk on Earth's soft grass, feeling rain drip on her skin, tasting foods that were completely alien to her. She had never known flavors like chocolate or fruits that grew naturally instead of in labs. Everything amazed her. Yet even in her wonder, she noticed the quiet moments when Daniel seemed elsewhere, lost in memories she could not see. One evening, after a long day of official meetings and greetings from dignitaries, Daniel returned to his small quarters. The room was simple, functional, and quiet, the only place he could truly rest. Lyra followed, silently observing the man she had come to respect more than anyone else she had ever met. Daniel sat heavily on a chair, rubbing his face with his hands. His uniform was stained with the marks of travel, fatigue lining every movement. I thought I would feel proud, he said, voice low. I thought victory would feel like relief, but it doesn't, it feels empty. Lyra stepped closer. Because war leaves things behind, she said softly. Not just cities or armies, but people, memories, pain that doesn't go away. Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her. His eyes were heavy with grief he had carried for years, eyes that had seen too many friends die, too many families shattered, too many innocent lives lost. Every night I hear them again, he admitted quietly. Screams, burning buildings, faces that I can't forget. And sometimes I wake up thinking it's still happening. I don't know if I'll ever. Stop. Lyra placed a gentle hand on his arm. It was a small gesture, but it carried a warmth he had not known in years. Then let me be with you, she said. Let me carry some of it with you so you don't have to bear it alone. He shook his head slightly. I've carried it alone for so long. I don't know if I can let someone in. Then start small, she whispered. Sit with me. Talk if you want. Or don't talk, just let me be here. Daniel didn't respond at first. He stared at his hands, calloused and scarred, hands that had killed and healed and carried more weight than anyone should. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he let her hand rest against his. The contact was small, simple, human, yet it felt like a bridge across years of pain. I don't want to be broken, he said finally, voice tight. I don't want to be just another casualty of war even now that it's over. You're not broken, Lyra said gently. You survived. That makes you stronger than anyone I know. And even if you feel broken, it doesn't mean you're alone. Not anymore. He closed his eyes, feeling the softness of her touch, the calm steadiness she radiated. It was strange, this alien being from another world, yet she felt like home. She was quiet, attentive, and unafraid to simply exist alongside him. And in that quiet existence, he found a strange peace he hadn't known he needed. Hours passed in silence, the kind of silence that spoke more than words ever could. Lyra remained beside him, a gentle presence in the dark, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. She did not push, did not demand, did not question, she simply offered herself. And for the first time, Daniel felt that perhaps someone could see him fully and still stay. I think I can rest tonight, he said finally. A small, almost shy admission. Because you're here. Lyra smiled faintly, her violet eyes shining with warmth. I will always be here, she said softly. Not as a prize, not as a symbol, but as someone who cares. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. And in that quiet room, amid the hum of the city outside, two wounded souls began to heal together. One, a soldier who had seen too much blood. The other, a princess who had never been seen at all. Until now. For the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to hope that even after war, life could still be gentle, even with all its scars. The morning air was crisp and clear when the message arrived. It came through secure channels, stamped with the seal of the Zarathi royal court. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she held it. Daniel read it over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with every word. The message demanded Lyra's immediate return. The Zarathi Empire, fragile and fractured after their defeat, wanted their youngest princess back to secure alliances and strengthen the throne. It was an order backed with threats, subtle but unmistakable. Their queen's emissaries made it clear. If Daniel refused, there would be consequences for him and for Lyra. Lyra's violet eyes met his. They want me back, she whispered, voice small, almost afraid. And they will not take no for an answer. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He had known this day might come, yet nothing could have prepared him for the weight of it. He looked down at her, at the quiet, fragile figure who had become so much more than a prize, so much more than a survivor of shadows. She was a person, a companion, a friend, maybe even more. And he could not, would not, and let them take her from him. They will hunt us, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. We cannot fight the entire empire alone. I've been hunted before, Daniel replied, his tone firm, almost defiant. I've survived worse than this, and I will not let them cage you. Not you, not anyone I care about. Lyra's hand found his, small but warm. She rested it against his, letting the weight of her trust sink into him. Then we must run, she said. Together, not as soldier and prize, but as equals. You cannot fight this alone, and neither can I. Daniel nodded slowly. He had lived his life following orders, obeying commands, surviving the mission. But this was different. No law, no treaty, no strategy mattered more than her safety. The choice was clear, even if dangerous. They left the city quietly that night. The hum of engines carried them far from the glittering lights in the eyes of both humans and Zarathi, who would question their decision. Lyra had learned quickly to move silently, to adapt to human technology, to trust the instincts of someone who had seen too many deaths to be afraid of a little danger. As they fled, Daniel glanced at her. Her violet eyes were focused, her face calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of worry in her gaze. I won't let them take you, he said softly, more to himself than to her. I know, she replied, and I trust you. It was a simple exchange, but it carried a weight neither of them had ever felt before. They were not just fleeing for survival. They were choosing each other, defying empires and customs, ignoring titles and expectations. For the first time, Lyra felt free. Not because she had escaped her kingdom, but because she had chosen to trust someone fully. The journey through the dark of space was long and filled with danger. But every challenge, every evasion, every silent heartbeat of fear, drew them closer together. They shared meals in the dim light of the ship, exchanged quiet stories of their lives, and found comfort in small gestures. A hand on a shoulder, a quiet laugh, a shared glance. Daniel, once haunted by loss and violence, found a new purpose. Protecting Lyra was no longer a mission. It was a choice of the heart. And Lyra, once invisible and forgotten, discovered strength she had never known. She was not just running from an empire. She was running toward a life she wanted, with someone who had seen her fully and loved her enough to fight for her freedom. By the time dawn streaked across the stars, they were far from the human capital and the Zirathi throne. The universe felt vast and quiet, yet it also felt like home, because they had each other. And for the first time, Daniel realized that some battles were not fought for glory, medals, or recognition. Some battles were fought for love, for trust, and for the courage to protect someone who mattered more than life itself. And he would fight that battle until his last breath. The universe was quiet around them, a canvas of stars stretching endlessly in every direction. Daniel piloted the ship with calm precision, but his mind was not on navigation. His thoughts lingered on Lyra, sitting beside him, her violet eyes reflecting the distant constellations. They had escaped the reach of empires, both human and Zirathi, and for the first time in years they were free. Lyra leaned back, her hands resting lightly on her lap. "Do you think they'll come for us?" she asked softly. Daniel glanced at her, his expression serious but gentle. "They might, but I don't care. We've chosen each other, and no law, no empire, no queen can take that away." A small smile curved her lips. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel hope. Unshaken by the judgments or expectations that had haunted her since childhood, she was no longer a shadow, no longer the forgotten princess. Here, in the quiet vastness of space, she was seen, truly seen, and valued. They landed on a small, forgotten moon, far from the politics of both their worlds. Its surface was rough and barren, but it had water and air, and most importantly, it had solitude. Daniel helped Lyra step out of the ship, and together they walked across the gray dust, listening to the soft whisper of the wind over the rocks. "This is beautiful," Lyra said, her voice full of wonder. "It's simple, but it feels alive." Daniel nodded. "It's ours for now, a place to breathe, to heal, to live without watching our backs every second." They built their home slowly, using technology salvaged from the ship and materials found on the moon. Every corner reflected both their worlds, human practicality and Zirathi elegance. Metal walls softened with fabrics, lights that were bright but gentle, and small gardens growing plants that reminded Lyra of Earth's forests. She laughed when the first flowers bloomed, colors so vibrant they seemed impossible after years of war and gray skies. Nights were spent under the stars. They would sit outside, hands brushing lightly, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel shared stories of Earth, of cities that never slept, of oceans that stretched further than the eye could see. Lyra shared tales of Zirath, its quiet beauty, the music of its wind through crystal towers, and the lessons she had learned from growing in shadows. One evening, as they watched a small sun dip below the horizon of the moon, Daniel turned to her. "I chose you not because of your title or your rank, not because anyone expected it. I chose you because I saw you, and I still see you. Every day I see you, and I don't ever want to stop." Lyra's eyes glimmered with tears she did not try to hide. "I was invisible for so long," she whispered. "And yet, you saw me. You didn't just see a princess or a prize or a shadow. You saw me, and I love that you did." Daniel reached out, holding her hand gently but firmly. "And I love that you trusted me enough to come with me, to stay with me. You are no one's shadow now, Lyra. You are my partner, my friend, my equal, and nothing will ever change that." The months passed, and their lives grew full and quiet. They planted gardens, built small structures, and sometimes received messages from afar, which they ignored, choosing the solitude of their little world. Together they healed. Daniel's nightmares became less frequent, and Lyra's once lonely heart filled with laughter, hope, and purpose. Travelers who passed near the moon spoke of a light glowing softly at night, a light that seemed alive with warmth. Some said it was a human and an alien, living together in harmony, tending gardens and sharing stories under the stars. Others whispered that it was proof of something greater, that even across galaxies, even between the most different of beings, trust and love could exist. Daniel and Lyra had survived war, judgment, and fear. They had escaped empires that would have torn them apart. And now, in the quiet of the stars, they had found something far more precious than victory. A life together, built not on duty, not on politics, but on the simple, human truth that seeing someone, truly seeing them, is the most powerful act of all. And so, amid the stars, the human soldier and the least admired alien princess lived, loved and thrived, a testament to the strength of hearts that choose each other, and the proof that humanity, even in its smallest acts of kindness and courage, could shine brighter than any empire in the universe.